"Back away from that booth, old man," growled the biker, delivering a forceful blow that echoed through the bar like a pistol shot. The 65-year-old veteran staggered backward, blood trickling from his nostrils, yet he maintained his balance. The establishment, previously alive with twangy melodies and lively chatter, went completely quiet. Nobody uttered a word in defense. Everyone remained frozen. The elderly gentleman inhaled deeply, reached inside his coat, and calmly extracted a basic flip phone. He pressed just one number. Then he eased himself down onto the edge of the booth to steady himself. Within 10 minutes, the rumble of engines approached down East Maxwell Avenue in Montgomery, Alabama. 3 matte black vehicles halted abruptly outside the establishment. Their doors swung open simultaneously. Military personnel stepped out, disciplined, methodical, formidable, composed. Their leader, a tall, broad-shouldered man with fair complexion and a precise military haircut, strode through the entrance and announced, "Who put their hands on my father?" James "Red" Turner was a 65-year-old former staff sergeant who had served 27 years in the U.S. Army with 3 tours of duty. His nickname in Iraq had been Iron Heart, not because of his fierceness, but because he remained composed under pressure. Since leaving the service, Red maintained a simple routine. Every afternoon around 3 p.m., he would visit Taylor's Roadhouse, on Montgomery's east side, an establishment where he once shared drinks with his military comrades. Now he volunteered to assist the staff by clearing tables, restocking supplies, and sweeping floors. He never accepted payment. It wasn't about money. It was about connection. He had lost his spouse to cancer 2 years earlier, and his knees ached every morning when he rose. Yet Red appeared faithfully each day, donning the same olive-drab jacket and well-worn U.S. Army cap with its bent brim. That particular day, a motorcycle group arrived just before sunset. Roaring exhaust pipes, boisterous laughter. 6 riders in total. They strutted into Taylor's as if they owned the place. They weren't familiar faces. They wore matching black vests emblazoned with Knights of the Blacktop, Chapter 7. They spelled trouble. The largest member stood 6'3", approximately 250 pounds of muscle covered in tattoos. A gold chain gleamed beneath his vest. He surveyed the room, sizing people up for intimidation. His patch identified him as Tank. Tank pushed past the counter, tossed his helmet down, and spilled beer onto the corner booth that Red had just finished cleaning. Red approached as always, cloth in hand, quietly wiping up the spill without making eye contact. Tank's chair scraped, loudly as he rose. "You deaf old-timer?" he sneered. "I said get your wrinkled hands off my booth." Red looked up gradually, eyes steady, voice calm. "Just maintaining cleanliness, son. Always have." That's when Tank's fist launched forward, carrying something darker than mere anger. It connected with a vicious impact on Red's face. The establishment fell completely silent. A few glasses clinked nervously. Bart, the manager who had known Red for years, halted mid-step. Red faltered, steadying himself against the booth's corner. Blood seeped from his lip. He didn't retaliate. Instead, he reached into his jacket, extracted a worn black flip phone, and pressed a speed dial button. One ring, then an answer. "Dad," responded the voice on the other end. Red spoke softly, composed despite the bleeding. "Got a minute, son?" Facing a situation at Taylor's, Captain Marcus Turner, commander of the 187th Security Forces Group at Maxwell Air Force Base, immediately stood from his desk. A tall, clean-cut officer with an imposing presence and steel blue eyes. Marcus didn't hesitate. "You hurt?" "Nah, but I could use some assistance." Marcus understood his father. Red Turner never requested help unless necessary, and if necessary, it meant boundaries had been crossed. 10 minutes later, 3 black tactical vehicles departed from the base, unmarked but unmistakable. One Humvee displayed the American flag. At Taylor's, Tank stood with crossed arms, joking, with his group as if he'd just shared something amusing. Red sat quietly on the booth's edge, dabbing blood from his lip with a napkin. He hadn't spoken another word. The bartender avoided looking his way. So did every regular patron. The silence wasn't merely fear, it was shame. When Taylor's doors opened with a distinct creak, everyone turned. Captain Marcus Turner entered, his uniform immaculate, his boots making no sound on the wooden floor. 6 Air Force personnel followed behind. Not one carried a visible weapon. They didn't need to. Marcus scanned the room. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Where is the individual?" he asked. "Who struck Staff Sergeant James Turner?" No one answered. The room held its breath, glances shifting between Marcus Turner's uniform and the quiet authority in his voice. The tension grew thicker, the weight of unspoken truths pressing against every wall of Taylor's roadhouse. One younger biker shifted uncomfortably, but a look from Tank kept him silent. Marcus took one measured step forward, his gaze locked on the man wearing the black vest with Tank stitched in yellow thread. "I'll ask once more," he stated, his tone even, not elevated, but sharp enough to cut through the fear permeating the room. "Who laid hands on my father?" Tank straightened, attempting to summon the intimidating presence that had earned him respect from his gang. "I didn't know who he was," he replied with a shrug that appeared more defensive than dismissive. "He got in my way, tried to clean my table like some janitor. Wasn't trying to start anything serious." Marcus's expression remained unchanged. He glanced toward the wall as one of his soldiers raised a compact projector and displayed a video across the old wood-paneled surface. After a moment of static, there it was. Grainy, time-stamped footage from the bar's security system, retrieved remotely from the establishment's cloud-based camera archive. Everyone watched silently as the video showed Red Turner moving unhurriedly, wiping down the booth, then Tank entering the frame, a blur of motion, a fist thrown forcefully, the older man jerking backward from impact. The image froze with Red clutching the table's edge to maintain balance. No one spoke. The evidence had been recorded. Marcus stepped forward, his voice lower now, quieter, yet twice as weighty. "That man you struck served in Desert Storm and Iraq, and trained 2 full generations of soldiers. He led search and rescue operations through buildings still burning from IEDs. He carried men younger than yourself out of fires. And now in retirement, he comes here to clean your table and receives a punch for his efforts." Marcus paused, allowing his words to resonate. "You didn't merely hit a person. You struck a legacy, a history, a life you'll never comprehend." The bartender, Bart, finally stepped forward, his voice laden with shame. "Captain Marcus, sir, I should have intervened. I just—" Red's voice interrupted from the booth, steady and unshaken. "You froze, Bart. That's reality. Freezing doesn't make you cowardly, but remaining frozen does." Bart looked downward, the truth striking harder than any physical blow. Marcus nodded slightly to one of his men, who stepped forward with a clipboard and began quietly recording names. Another moved toward the bar's back office to secure the physical security footage and internal logs. Everything proceeded with precision. No shouting, no shoving, just the quiet, exacting presence of military order stepping in where civilian courage had faltered. Tank attempted once more to minimize the situation, his voice wavering under the gravity of the moment. "Look, I didn't intend to—" Marcus silenced him with a glance. "You've said enough." Then he addressed the room. "This location may not be a combat zone, but moments like this reveal character. When you remain inactive while someone's dignity is violated before you, you aren't neutral. You're complicit." The bar remained silent except for the projector fans, humming. Even the jukebox seemed to have silenced itself out of respect. Local police arrived 5 minutes later, having been contacted directly by the base's civilian coordination team. The officers, both veterans themselves, quickly reviewed the video and without hesitation handcuffed Tank and informed him of his rights. No resistance, no objection. Just the sound of handcuffs clicking and the collective exhale of a crowd realizing the situation had progressed beyond redemption. Outside, a small gathering had formed. Locals, nearby shop owners, and several off-duty base personnel who had noticed the vehicles. They watched as Tank was escorted away, flanked by 2 officers, his intimidating presence dissipating like air from a punctured tire. Captain Turner exited shortly afterward, his expression unreadable. Red remained seated on the bench outside, the same one he'd returned to after being struck, as if waiting for nothing more than time itself to restore balance. Marcus approached, stood at attention, and delivered a slow, firm salute. Red looked up, his eyes meeting his son's. Then gradually he returned the salute with a nod conveying decades of unspoken pride. "You arrived quickly," Red remarked, his lips still damaged but his tone steady. "Had no time to consider," Marcus replied. "Didn't need any." Red chuckled softly, winced, then said, "That's the nature of instincts. Build them properly, and they require no rehearsal." The soldiers lined up behind Marcus then, 6 in total. One by one, each offered a crisp salute to the veteran seated on the bench. They spoke no words. None were necessary. The gesture communicated everything. Across the street, a child no older than 10 held his mother's hand, staring wide. Eyed at the scene. "Mama, why are they saluting that elderly man?" She bent down and whispered, "Because he's the reason they understand what honor looks like." That evening, Taylor's Roadhouse closed early. Bart affixed a paper sign to the door, "Closed for restoration." The following morning, the establishment reopened with a framed photograph of Red in uniform mounted above the booth he had always maintained. A plaque beneath read, "Served abroad, protected here." Patrons stood when he entered. Nobody asked him to work again, but he still cleaned the same booth out of habit rather than necessity. It was never about cleaning. It had always been about presence, about legacy. And legacy doesn't strike back. It simply appears with duty-bound reliability, respect in hand, and a silent promise that certain boundaries, once crossed, demand more than apologies. They demand response not from anger or vengeance, but from principle. The incident didn't fade as most bar confrontations do. By morning, video footage captured by a teenage bystander had already spread across social media, showing the moment. Captain Marcus Turner and his team entered Taylor's Roadhouse. The audio was faint, but the tension was unmistakable. You could hear Marcus ask, "Where is the man who laid hands on my father?" That single line resonated deeply with people throughout the town and beyond state boundaries. Within hours, local news outlets picked up the story. Headlines declared, "Veteran assaulted in bar, aided by son and military unit." Some labeled it excessive. Others called it discipline. Nearly all considered it justice. Red cared nothing for headlines. He never had. He simply wanted the booth properly cleaned, the tables arranged neatly, and a peaceful spot to enjoy his ginger ale each afternoon. Yet suddenly, he represented something larger. The mayor's office called, asking if he would attend a Veterans Memorial Luncheon. Montgomery. High's principal requested he address history students. Churches invited him to Sunday services for public recognition. He politely declined most invitations. "I'm no hero," he told one local reporter. "I'm someone who was assaulted and had a son who responded. That shouldn't be newsworthy. That should be expected." Yet something about the quiet integrity in his voice made people want to listen more intently, not less. At the base, Captain Turner was called by the colonel for debriefing, not for reprimand, but to discuss the overwhelming public reaction. "You realize," the colonel said, crossing his arms, "your presence in that establishment wasn't standard protocol?" Marcus nodded. "Yes, sir." "And you brought 6 airmen, a military convoy, and displayed classified security footage on a civilian wall." "Yes, sir," Marcus repeated. "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" Marcus met his gaze. "I would repeat my actions exactly, sir, word for word, step for step, because if we instruct our troops to protect their own during conflict, yet fail to do the same during peacetime, then everything else is merely ceremonial." The colonel remained silent momentarily. Then he leaned back and said, "You're dismissed, but don't be surprised if you're addressing more than luncheons next month." The bar transformed, not just in furnishings or atmosphere, but in essence. Regular patrons, who once averted their eyes, began meeting each other's gazes. Bart, the manager, started hosting Veteran Mondays with discounted meals, but more importantly, moments of recognition. He invited other retired service members in Montgomery to join Red, exchange stories, share old photographs. Young people appeared too. Teenagers who previously would have scrolled past stories like Red's now sat across from him asking questions, writing school essays about courage, loyalty, silence, and the dangers of choosing inaction. 1 week after the assault, Tank's court appearance attracted a modest audience. He entered a guilty plea. No dramatics, no denial. The judge, a Vietnam-era Marine, sentenced him to 12 months probation, anger management therapy, and community service specifically at the County Veterans Center. "You believed you were striking a stranger," the judge stated. "It turns out you assaulted a generation." Tank offered no argument. He simply nodded, avoiding Red's gaze as he was escorted from the courtroom. Red didn't attend to gloat. He simply remarked, "The system handled it. That's all I ever wanted." A month later, Marcus found himself at a school assembly standing beside his father, while sixth-grade students sang the national anthem in slightly off-key harmony. Red wore a plain suit jacket. No ribbons, no medals, just his wedding band and army ring. When a student asked how it felt to be considered a hero, he smiled gently and responded, "Heroes are those who don't return home. I'm here because I had someone who appeared when needed." Marcus regarded his father then, an unusual moment of emotion tightening his throat. Later that night, they sat on Red's front porch beneath Alabama stars, 2 chairs creaking gently in unison. Cicadas hummed in the background. "You needn't have dropped everything for me," Red commented. "I didn't drop everything," Marcus replied. "I prioritize what matters." Red chuckled. "You always were quick with words. Got that from your mother." "I got everything else from you," Marcus said, gazing at the horizon. What began as a violent encounter unexpectedly became a catalyst. Churches began inviting local law enforcement and military representatives to speak jointly about accountability and community protection. A town hall was organized at the Civic Center regarding bystander responsibility, what people should do when witnessing injustice. And Taylor's Roadhouse. It evolved into something entirely different. The booth, where Red was struck, now featured a bronze plate embedded in the wood. He stood. We followed. The establishment's jukebox now began each afternoon with the same song Red once played quietly every week, "Ring of Fire" by Johnny Cash. Nobody skipped it. In the months that followed, Red continued his daily 3 p.m. walks to Taylor's. Same jacket, same unhurried pace. Some days he brought reading material, other days just the cloth in his back pocket. People still observed him, but no longer from curiosity, now from respect. If the booth needed cleaning, someone else attended to it before he arrived. If a new patron raised their voice excessively, a single glance from the regulars restored order. Occasionally, a young person who had read about him, viewed the video, or heard the story secondhand, would nervously approach and say something, like, "Sir, I just wanted to express my gratitude for your actions," and your son's response, and Red, never one to seek praise, would offer the same reply each time. "It's not what we did, it's what we refused to tolerate." Perhaps that was ultimately the lesson. That courage isn't always loud. That strength sometimes manifests as restraint. That legacy isn't constructed through medals or salutes, but through quiet choices made during ordinary moments. The story of Red Turner and his son Marcus wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about violence answered with force. It concerned establishing boundaries, not from anger, but from principle, and maintaining those boundaries long enough for others to recognize them too. And that, for a generation seeking stability, proved sufficient to initiate something greater than a news cycle. It served to remind a community what honor truly resembles, not in uniform, but in action. Certain moments may seem insignificant, yet they reveal a person's true character. When a father is attacked and onlookers remain silent, it transcends physical injury. It becomes a wake-up call. Honor recognizes no age limit. Respect doesn't stem from fear, but from those who choose action when it matters most. If you've ever wondered when to stand for what's right, the answer remains constant. Now, don't remain silent.